After being rejected by the Kui family of Qinghe, I became the laughingstock of the entire capital. My father found me disgraceful and wished I would just die of illness. In the dead of winter, under a pale moon, my stepmother punished me by forcing me to kneel in the snow, feverish and shivering. Just then, the infamous crippled son of the Zhou family, known as the living Hades, happened to pass by. Clinging to the hem of his robe, at the end of my rope, I asked in a trembling voice, "Will you marry me?" He looked at me once, then lazily reached out his hand. He pulled me out of the mire. That was his answer. Outside the Women's Academy, people came and went, yet I was publicly turned away, barred from entering. Just half a month ago, I was still the most brilliant scholar among all the young ladies in the capital, the top student of the academy. But now I was rejected because I'd been cast aside by the heir of the century-old noble house of Kui. He had personally delivered the annulment letter. I'd done nothing wrong, just failed to win his affection. That alone was enough. But this was only the beginning. Invitations to women's banquets stopped arriving. The noble girls of the capital avoided me like the plague. My father was ashamed to let me out of the house, wishing I would die quietly at home. Even the academy, once proud of me, erased my name. The academy official stood on the steps, coldly repeating, "Any woman whose engagement is annulled may no longer attend this school. Miss Jiang, please leave." The academy had always upheld strict standards. I was the first to be expelled after having been admitted. Laughter and whispers buzzed around me. If I were dumped like that, I'd have hanged myself with a white sash long ago. How does she still have the nerve to show her face here? If her virtue and conduct weren't lacking, why would the Kui family back out? Who knows how much of her so-called talent was even real? Standing in the wind, I looked like I might topple at any moment. The official ordered all my belongings from the academy returned. From start to finish, I wasn't allowed to take a single step inside. When the last item, the green chin, was handed to me, I took it with pale lips and asked, "Madam, what did I do wrong?" She had once taught me music and always admired my talent and diligence. She stared at me for a long time. Her stiff face twitched slightly as she said, "You did nothing wrong. It's just that the world has always been cruel to women." I nearly wept. Since childhood, I'd known I would one day marry the heir of the Kui family. That was my late mother's last promise to me. Even if father detested me, even if my stepmother was harsh, I had this assurance. For the sake of the Kui family, no one would dare mistreat me. The Kui family of Qinghe was a true aristocratic clan. The heir, Kui Zhao, was brilliant, rebellious, a shining star. I knew being the mistress of that household would be no easy task. So I got into the Women's Academy, becoming the capital's most talented scholar. I would manage the household, host grand banquets without flaw. I devoted countless days and nights to mastering the arts: music, chess, calligraphy, painting, virtue, speech, appearance, and skill. I finally earned the family's approval. The old matriarch even came to see me and gave her silent consent. But I never realized Kui Zhao never planned to marry me. He said, "Miss Jiang, I don't want a woman who's no different from every other lady in the Kui clan." To him, I was nothing but another stiff, proper, noble daughter, indistinguishable from the rest. I wanted to be the mistress of his house. He only wanted someone he liked. I had always been working toward the wrong goal. This ending shouldn't have surprised me. But Kui Zhao, what about the years I spent loving you? The moment I received the annulment letter, I knew I was finished. No one would dare marry a woman cast off by the Kui family. After returning from the academy, I developed a fever. My mind was hazy. I dreamed of my mother, on her deathbed. She had been ill for 3 years. Father already had a new woman by his side and never once came to see her. Even at the end, it was just me holding her hand in the cold, silent room. She made me remember every word. "Your father is heartless. Your stepmother will be cruel. You must plan for yourself. Study at the academy. Learn virtue and skill. Be wise. Endure it all. Marry into the Kui family, and everything will be all right. Endure it, she said. Just hold on, and things will get better. But mother, you never told me what if Kui Zhao doesn't want to marry me. On the third day of my fever, my nurse still couldn't get permission from my stepmother to summon a doctor. Father forbade anyone from treating me or sending for help. Acting on his orders, my stepmother made me kneel in the snow each night to reflect on my behavior. With no medicine, no aid, the illness only grew worse. By the fifth day, even my fingertips were burning. I coughed up blood. It finally hit me. Father wanted me dead. The Jiang family didn't need a daughter who'd been rejected. That day, distinguished guests arrived at the estate. The whole house was lit up. Preparations had begun 3 days prior, and faint sounds of music floated through the air. Snow fell thick and heavy. My body alternated between burning and freezing. I was barely conscious. Amid the quiet, snow-lit night, I heard footsteps. A red official's robe swept before me. It was him, the infamous smiling cripple from the Zhou family. He looked down at me in silence. Instinctively, I grabbed the edge of his robe like it was my last hope. My throat closed up. It was abrupt and shameless. Through tears, I asked, "Will you marry me? I can paint. I can manage a household. I only have a bad reputation." His attendants dared not speak. He looked down at me for a while. The lanterns above cast a warm glow on his face, softening his usual cold cruelty. Zhou Tang reached out his hand, pulled me from the snow that was his answer. I never imagined I would one day be tied to Zhou Tang. I was a sheltered noblewoman. He was a predator in court, a trusted minister feared and despised for his ruthlessness. His reputation was beyond saving, but he saved my life. I looked down at my hands. My palms still felt warm. I didn't know where I'd found the courage to grab his robe. I was barely recovered when my father summoned me to the front hall. The last time I'd been there was when the Kui family came to annul the engagement. This time was different. The room was piled with wedding gifts, all bearing the Zhou family's seal. I lifted the lid of a box and saw dazzling treasures. The matchmaker had long departed. Father sat at the head of the room, face dark. The moment I entered, a teacup flew toward me, shattering an inch from where I stood. "How dare you seduce Zhou Tang? He's ruthless and surrounded by enemies. Do you want to get us all killed?" First dumped, then secretly engaged. How did I, a man of honor, raise a daughter like you? He'll be here soon. You're going to reject this proposal to his face. My skirt was soaked with tea. I asked softly, "Father, how exactly should I refuse Zhou Tang?" My stepmother, seated nearby, picked up where he left off. She had once been just a concubine, rising to the position of wife only after outlasting my mother. For the past 10 years, she'd lived comfortably with a son and daughter of her own. Only I remembered how my mother's eyes never closed when she died. My stepmother smiled sweetly and said, "That's easy. I have a nephew, an honest man who doesn't mind marrying a woman who's been rejected. When Inspector Zhou arrives, just tell him you're already engaged to my nephew. It's a way out." My maid beside me looked up in disbelief. Everyone in the house knew that nephew, over 30, hideously ugly. How could someone like that be a match for the legitimate daughter of the Jiang family? Father didn't object. He remained silent, and in the absurdity of it all, I felt an unexpected sense of calm. I wondered where I had gone wrong. For over a decade, I never defied my father, endured my stepmother's harshness, and earned a reputation for filial piety. How had I ended up like this? But the situation wasn't what everyone thought. Father had intended to reject the match, and Zhou Tang knew it. So he brought a gift. The servants in the front hall said Zhou Tang smiled slowly and calmly as he opened the gift in front of my father and stepmother. Inside was a bloodied, severed tongue. It belonged to my stepmother's nephew. He said, "This man actually dared to loudly declare he'd marry Jiang Zhaoshui, the eldest daughter of the Jiang family. Absurd. Slander and public insult under the laws of Great Wei that warrants the cutting of the tongue. Jiang Zhaoshui is my fiancée. Anyone who touches her crosses me. What say you?" Grand Tutor Jiang. Though my father had weathered political storms for years, he had never seen such brutal, direct methods. My stepmother fainted on the spot and vomited uncontrollably after she woke. After leaving the front hall, Zhou Tang came to see me. I was painting. A long silk scroll spread across my desk. He stood by the window and casually placed a hairpin on the table. Pearl flowers and emerald feathers, it was the same kind once worn by the imperial consort at the palace banquet, a rare tribute from the southern kingdom. It was incredibly valuable. I pressed my lips together, hesitating for a long time. My hand holding the brush clenched and loosened. I looked seriously at Zhou Tang and said, "I was once rejected." Just 5 simple words, yet they caught in my throat. I had lived my whole life carefully, and this one stain was enough to ruin me, enough to make me hang my head forever. Zhou Tang chuckled, his eyes deep. So what? It was only one rejection. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. I was the top student at the Women's Academy for 10 years. I organized a palace banquet for the imperial consort. I've always handled things with grace. You won't need to worry about the household. I'll make a fine wife. Marrying me wasn't such a terrible idea. So, Zhou Tang, can you not leave me behind? He stepped a little closer. My heart leapt into my throat. The light spilled onto his face like golden fragments. He slid the hairpin into my hair and wiped away the tear on my cheek. I know you're the finest young lady in the capital. As long as I'm here, you'll live the finest life. He whispered gently, so don't cry anymore. Just as no one had expected the Kui family to reject me, no one imagined that I, the most promising daughter of the Jiang family, would become engaged to Zhou Tang, a man known as the Imperial Hound. Yet that was what happened. For a long time after, father and stepmother avoided me, unwilling to recall the bloody scene they had witnessed. Only my old nurse, who had raised me since birth, worried aloud. Inspector Zhou is ruthless and frightening. What if he treats you poorly after you marry? I thought for a moment. He won't. My firm answer startled her, but the truth was, Zhou Tang wasn't like what they said. He hadn't let me die in the snow. I believed he was a man of his word, or at least, I wanted to believe. As soon as we were engaged, he entrusted me with all his land deeds and businesses, saying, "You'll be handling it sooner or later anyway." He also casually took one of my paintings from my desk, a battle scene. I was both annoyed and amused. When I was engaged to Kui Zhao, we saw each other maybe once every few years, and even then, barely exchanged a word. I had never met anyone as unreserved as Zhou Tang. It wasn't until the Lantern Festival that I found out what he did with that painting. Chengde Hall, which normally only catered to nobility, would host a charity auction on the Lantern Festival, selling works by students from the Women's Academy. All proceeds would go to the frontier troops in the Northwest. For young ladies, it was a chance to gain renown. Since I was 12, my paintings had always sold out at the festival. But this year, when my maid brought my work to Chengde Hall, the steward refused to accept it, saying my reputation was too tainted, even my painting wasn't allowed through the door. My maid returned in tears, furious at the humiliation. I thought Zhou Tang wouldn't care about something so trivial, but I didn't expect what he did next. Across from Chengde Hall, on a tall platform, he had placed a giant lantern. The moment I saw it, I nearly cried. Printed on the lantern was my battle scene. Lit from within, the warriors seemed to come alive, armor gleaming, banners flying. Everyone could see my art. That's what Zhou Tang had done. Every passerby stopped in awe. No one entered Chengde Hall. The steward inside was furious. Young nobles flocked to inquire about the painting. An old man tending the lantern said with a smirk, "Top-tier artistry, top-tier lantern. My lady's work is rare. If not for the Northwest war effort, it wouldn't be released at all. All proceeds will go to the army. The price is 10,000 taels, no less." The crowd gasped. Which young lady paints such fierce, commanding scenes? Which young lady's work dares start at 10,000? As the old man finished, the crowd fell silent. All eyes turned to the young man in blue standing in the center, like a blue moon fallen from the sky. He had been quietly admiring the lantern for a while. Every stroke resonated with him. Joy glowed softly in his heart. Especially when he heard the artist was a woman, it was the start of all fated love stories. The Kui family of Qinghe will take this painting, Kui Zhao said, eyes lowered. I'd like to meet the lady who painted it. I never thought Kui Zhao would like the painting, but I had originally painted it for him. Though the heir of the Kui family, he had traveled widely with his teacher since childhood, studying in both the south and northwest, rarely staying long in the capital. Now he was headed to train with the frontier army. Blades know no mercy. The old matriarch of the Kui family had cried countless times over this, and was desperate for us to marry after I came of age, hoping it would anchor Kui Zhao's drifting heart. But I thought, there's nothing wrong with battle and marching. The rules of the capital had never bound him. He was always so gentle, yet so free. Against the Kui family's wishes, I spent months painting a battle scene to wish him triumphant return as a hero. But before I could send it, I received his annulment. The painting never reached him yet. After many twists and turns, it still ended up in his hands. The old man on the high platform had already pointed him in my direction. Thankfully, I was wearing a veil. I turned and quickly left with my maid. At this point, there was no need to meet, only more awkwardness for us both. Just as I stepped onto the stone bridge, I heard Kui Zhao call out from behind. I hesitated to turn around. He, who had been sent on diplomatic missions at age 10, now sounded hoarse. I am Kui Zhao of Qinghe. May I ask which family the young lady belongs to? Do you have a fiancé? That was what he really meant to ask. I knew I couldn't avoid him, so I turned around. Just then, a lantern vendor passed by, and the corner of the lantern brushed against my veil, knocking it loose. Lanterns bloomed like flowers in the eastern wind. Stars fell like rain. It was only a moment, but I saw the awe in his eyes, which quietly turned to shock as the light from the lanterns faded. I tucked my hands into my sleeves and said softly, "Young Master Kui, long time no see." Kui Zhao had always hated constraints. He never imagined fate would play such a cruel joke on him. He never expected that the painting he fell in love with would come from the very fiancé he had rejected. After a long silence, he said, "I heard the academy usually places student art in Chengde Hall, but there seems to have been a change this year." I looked at him calmly. It wasn't the academy that changed, it was me. Since the annulment, I've been barred from the academy. My paintings aren't allowed into Chengde Hall. That's why I had to resort to this. Kui Zhao looked up suddenly, disbelief in his eyes. He'd traveled far and wide, yet never thought that a single annulment could block all my paths. I spoke through clenched tears. That engagement wasn't your wish, I understand. A woman like me is not to your liking, I know. But Kui Zhao, did you ever think about what I was supposed to do? They say the heir of the Kui family bears the world in his heart and has earned countless honors, but he never once showed me mercy. I walked along the waterway. Lanterns released by the crowd floated downstream. The lights dazzled. The perfumed carriages filled the road. Only then did I realize everyone was avoiding me. When I looked back, I saw that Zhou Gutang had been following me all along, neither near nor far. Behind me, the lanterns glowed dimly. He still wore his crimson official robe. No wonder the crowd made way. I stopped walking. Zhou Gutang smiled faintly. "I thought you'd never notice me." My maid was already so frightened she could barely walk. According to street rumors, whenever Zhou Gutang smiled like that, someone was about to meet the king of hell. But I stepped toward him slowly, looked up, and said, "Thank you." Just 2 simple words for saving me from fire and water, from endless suffering. I still only dared to tug on his sleeve. Zhou Gutang looked down, then reached out his hand, completely wrapping mine in his palm. He said lazily, "Jiang Zhaoshui. From now on, hold this part. And by the way, I want more than just a thank you." That lantern he made with my battle painting, became the capital's favorite story for the next month. Even the battle-hardened Duke Wei couldn't stop praising the painting on it. The reputation of Miss Jiang rose once more throughout the capital. I even received an invitation from Princess Jialu herself. Princess Jialu held high status and was the founder of the Women's Academy in her youth. She had been widowed for years, yet suddenly decided to host another banquet. Every girl invited by her came from the capital's top families. But I hesitated to go, afraid they'd use my broken engagement as an excuse to humiliate me. Zhou Tang, however, closed the file in his hand. He was leaning by the window of a tea house. Below, the river flowed gently. These days, I often helped manage his shops and accounts from this very place. Whenever he wasn't on duty, he would stop by to sit and listen to the wind and willows. It was peaceful. I was still holding the invitation card, torn between going or not. Zhou Tang glanced up and said, "Life isn't always perfect. Everyone carries their share of regrets. The broken engagement wasn't your fault, Jiang Zhaoshui. There are some things I can help you with, but others you'll have to face on your own." I didn't know why, but those words sounded familiar. Still, Zhou Tang was right. Sooner or later, I would have to return to the world of noblewomen. Outside the window, the world bustled on. Only Zhou Tang stood quietly beneath it, his sword tucked calmly back into its sheath. He looked at me steadily and said, "Go on, I'll have your back." The princess's banquet was a flower exhibition held at Mount Chiwu, 100 miles outside the city. Just days before my departure, my carefully nurtured sacred peony was deliberately smashed by my stepmother. When I arrived, I saw only broken pieces on the floor. She stood by, nails painted redder than the flowers. The maid on duty was careless and broke the young lady's flower. What a shame. A maid knelt nearby, crying from the false accusation. My stepmother didn't want me at the banquet. She wanted my younger stepsister to go instead. I understood. In the past, I might have swallowed the insult for the sake of being known as a dutiful daughter. But not anymore. I reached out and pushed her, just as she once made me kneel in the snow. She lost her balance and fell among the broken shards. Her hand was slashed open, bleeding profusely. She looked up in shock. Was this still the ever-graceful, ever-proper Jiang Zhaoshui? I looked down at her from above and said softly, "I lost my grip. Please forgive me." A strange sense of satisfaction rose within me. This should have happened long ago, but I still needed a proper flower. In this freezing season, even ordinary blooms were scarce in the capital, let alone something so rare. I sent word to Zhou Tang, though I didn't hold out much hope. He had so many responsibilities. How could he spare time for something so trivial? On the morning of the banquet, I was already in my carriage when no word had come. Snow was falling over the capital. Mount Chiwu was far outside the city, so I set out before dawn. Cold wind kept slipping in through the curtains until I heard the sound of a fast-approaching horse. It was especially sharp in the snow. I lifted the curtain to see Zhou Tang reining in his horse before me. Snow dusted his shoulders, and cold clung to him. Carefully, he drew from his cloak a sky-blue snow lotus, glowing like jade. This flower was nearly impossible to find, known to grow only in treacherous places, rarely seen by the world. I didn't know how Zhou Tang managed to get it. I was speechless. I could only look up at him. The wind scattered the frost from his brow. He hid the bloodied cuts on his hand. Zhou Tang said, "Come back early." A flower found across 1,000 miles, a painting sold for a fortune, and in the end, all he said to me was, "Come back early." This was my first time meeting Princess Jialu. Held in great esteem, she had long been called the model woman of Great Wei. But due to chronic illness, she rarely appeared in public. Only a few guests were invited this time, but every one of them was a renowned noblewoman of the capital. As soon as I stepped out of the carriage, countless eyes turned my way, including those who had mocked me outside the academy gates. Did the princess send the wrong invitation? Why would she invite someone who's been dumped? That fancy battle lantern on the Lantern Festival. Some people still love stealing the spotlight like back in the academy. Lower your voice. She's got Jogu Tang now. A discarded bride and a crippled man. Sounds like a match made in hell. Normally, I could have swallowed the insult, but I wouldn't allow Zhou Gutang to be dragged into this. Just as I was about to snap back, a clear male voice rang out. Such bitter tongues. Standing in the snow, Kui Zhao's eyes were dark as ink, his voice cold. My aunt instructed that anyone who just insulted a guest is not welcome at the banquet. Please leave. As soon as he finished, the faces of those noble women turned pale. To be dismissed at the door by the highly respected princess, was there any clearer way to say they lacked virtue? Wasn't this the same kind of public humiliation I had endured when the academy turned me away? My gaze fell on Kui Zhao, and I remembered that the princess and the Kui family were distant relatives. It wasn't a stretch for him to call her aunt. As I passed by Kui Zhao, I heard a faint, nearly inaudible, sorry. If even a chance encounter invited such ridicule, what about the unseen insults? Kui Zhao couldn't bear to imagine. He wasn't a woman. He didn't know how hard it was to be one. But for a brief moment, he wanted to cry for me. Midway through the banquet, the sky-blue snow lotus Zhou Gutang had found for me became the undisputed centerpiece. The princess called me to her side. This was the first time I had ever seen her in person. I had grown up hearing her stories, vowing to become a woman as virtuous and talented as she was. Now, seeing her, I only felt her age and grace-white hair, yet kind and gentle eyes. She asked me questions from a few classic academy texts, and I answered each one. She took my wrist in her hand. My nephew, Kui Zhao, showed me your battle painting. It's been years since I've seen a woman paint with such unrestrained flair. Her eyes gleamed. Do you know how to ride a horse? The crowd fell silent for a moment. Though the princess had once ridden beside the founding emperor to conquer the land, modern noble women of the capital avoided anything to do with warriors. They even preferred donkey carts over horses. Kui Zhao tried to speak up for me, just saying aunt, but I had already nodded and answered softly. Yes, I can ride. Kui Zhao's gaze froze on me. The princess's interest had clearly been piqued. The snow was falling, and up on the mountain was a vast riding ground. To be honest, my riding skills were average at best, but curiously, Zhou Gutang had been pressing me to practice every day lately, saying it would build my strength. Turns out, his timing was perfect. The grounds were wide, veiled in mist. Riding there wasn't difficult. I only had to leap over a snowy stream mid-course. When I completed the circuit and stopped before Kui Zhao, he picked up the ribbon that had fallen from my hair. His heart pounded so wildly, he couldn't speak. I had already dismounted. An attendant led the horse away. Kui Zhao stood awkwardly and hoarsely said, I never imagined a proper noble lady like you could ride. I paused before replying. In the spring of Yuan Zhen's 8th year, at your coming-of-age ceremony, you said you liked women who could ride horses. In his youth, Kui Zhao hadn't lived in the capital. He returned for that ceremony. It was the first time I saw what he looked like, all grown up, refined and graceful, unbound by convention. This was the fiancé I had waited over 10 years to meet. I had always behaved properly, yet maneuvered desperately just to speak to him that day. That was the boldest thing I'd ever said. I summoned all my courage to ask, Young Master Kui, what kind of woman do you like? I could play music, paint, write, and had earned the Kui family's approval. I knew many things, but I didn't expect him to glance at me and say he liked women who could ride. Though the answer was odd, it didn't seem impossible. I believed I could earn happiness through effort. But as I looked at the stunned expression on Kui Zhao's face now, I finally realized back then. He had spoken casually. He had picked the one answer that would embarrass me the most. In that moment, Kui Zhao understood just how deeply he had wronged me. 10 years of affection could not be undone, not even if he introduced me to the princess and tried to restore my reputation. That joy was gone. It would never return. He felt so hollow he could hardly stand. He had defied family rules, rejected the career path laid out for him. He despised constraints and refused to marry the woman arranged for him. He longed for glory in the frontier, refused to stay in the capital, and believed he was right. But life is long, can you truly have it all? I reminded the princess of her younger self. She even handed me a handkerchief to wipe the sweat from my brow. Gentle and dignified, broad-minded, unyielding. Just 12 words. Yet they made my fingertips tremble. In an age where a woman's name could determine her whole life, the princess's praise was enough to wash away the stain of being rejected. A child like you would be more than capable of being the mistress of the Kui family. You should have been calling me aunt alongside Zhao. Her eyes swept over Kui Zhao's stricken face, and she sighed. But young people are reckless. He didn't have time to recognize your worth. Youthful pride who knew a wrong decision could be irreversible. The princess said, "Why don't I take you as my disciple? I still haven't found someone to inherit my musical arts." I looked up in surprise and saw her wise, clear gaze. She truly liked me and pitied what I'd been through. Life turns quickly from one winter to one spring. Just months ago, I nearly died from the disgrace of a broken engagement. Now, fate had changed. I received more invitations to women's banquets than I could count. Even common folk in the capital knew that the Jiang family had a daughter whose talent eclipsed the city. Even Princess Jialu made an exception to take her as her final disciple. Though unlucky in love, rejected once, it no longer seemed to matter. Plays were already being performed on the streets, telling the story of Kui Zhao's secret love for the Jiang family's daughter. How he only called off the wedding because he feared dying in battle. Otherwise, why would he spend a fortune buying her lantern on the Lantern Festival? Rumors flew, but one theory was widely accepted. Miss Jiang was perfect. Her only flaw was her current fiancé. Zhou Gutang, crippled and ruthless, didn't suit her at all. Rumors on the street could not be ignored. Princess Jialu personally intervened and reformed the Women's Academy, abolishing the rule that any woman who has been rejected cannot be admitted. Though frail, she still climbed the lecture dais with the support of her attendants. When I founded the academy, I hoped women would support each other. I never expected that decades later, the world's standards for women would only grow harsher. Having lived in seclusion for years, I hadn't realized just how many women have been turned away from the academy simply for being rejected. Being jilted and being of poor character are two different things. If even the academy won't accept them, where else in the world can they go? I still remembered that winter when I was rejected. I nearly died in the snow. Fortunately, a hand reached out to lift me. But how many women never made it through the winter of their rejection? I was waiting for the academy's early summer graduation ceremony. Originally, the plan was to finalize my marriage with Kui Zhao afterward. Who would have thought I'd end up engaged to Zhou Gutang? But lately, I rarely saw him. Zhou Gutang seemed to be occupied with a smuggling case in Jiangnan. During my free time, I never caught sight of him. The few times I did were on the streets he'd ride past on horseback, crimson robes fluttering like a butterfly. I stood by the roadside as he galloped by, never turning his head, never looking back, as if we were strangers, as if none of it had ever happened. He'd grown thinner. They said it was a major case and that he'd soon leave the capital, with no return date. I thought, no matter what, I had to see him before he left. But then I realized we had so little contact. Maybe he was too busy, or maybe the maid just never got a reply. So I rose early and waited outside his office. It was late spring, the sky just turning light, the air still cold. I waited nearly an hour before he finally emerged. Once known as the smiling Asura, Zhou Gutang now wore a constant chill on his face. That day, he was preparing to leave for the south. Zhou Gutang. He paused mid-mount and looked over. Through the pale mist and lonely morning, he spotted me at once. I stepped down from the carriage to retrieve the travel pack I had prepared for him. When I turned back, I saw him striding toward me. He rarely walked in front of me. As a child, he'd fallen ill and been treated by a quack due to his family's decline, leaving him with a limp in his left foot. His gait had never been graceful. But now, he walked toward me with resolve. I held back tears and said softly, "Jogu Tang, don't forget to bring me lotus flowers from Jiangnan's early summer. I'll wait for you. Come back soon." Jogu Tang set off for Jiangnan, amidst many dangers. He wrote to me that things were going well and he should make it back in time for my graduation. I waited with hope until one day, a strange unease gripped me. My chest felt tight. Then the news came. Jogu Tang's boat had been attacked by river bandits on the Yangtze. The vessel capsized. No body was found. One of his trusted aides in the capital brought me a letter Jogu Tang had written long ago, known as the Imperial Hound. His writing was bold and resolute. He wrote, "Life is rarely perfect. I've long danced on the blade's edge, and always knew I might die someday. All my assets and loyal men I entrust to you. I've annulled our marriage, don't mourn me. Find someone worthy. May your life hold no regrets." A few short lines, likely rewritten countless times. Wax tears dotted the paper. He had restored my name in the capital, earned me the princess's favor, left behind his legacy to secure my future. Jogu Tang had planned every possible path for me. His aide said, "Do you remember what you said to the young master at Tianmen Mountain when he was bullied for his limp? You said, 'Life is rarely perfect, but even with a limp, a man who can stand tall is still a true man.'" That sentence became the pillar of his life for the next 10 years. Outside, the spring rain poured suddenly, splashing into the room. Only then did I realize my face was soaked in tears. He wished me a happy life with someone else. But Jogu Tang, what about you? What will you do? At the graduation, I performed a blessing dance. Even the Empress herself praised me and asked me to dance again at the year-end ritual. Though the news of Jogu Tang's death swept through the city, because of the Empress and Princess's recognition, even without a marriage, matchmakers flooded the Jiang estate. Even the Kui family came, this time sending the old matriarch of the Duke's manor to formally propose on Kui Zhao's behalf. Her status was unmatched. Father was beaming with pride, but I refused. As I stepped out of the house, I was stopped by Kui Zhao. By autumn, he would leave for the northwest, just as he'd always dreamed, free and unbound. I had already heard. I bowed lightly and said, "May you ride freely in the northwest and rise high in your career." But Kui Zhao looked at me and asked, "Why did you refuse?" No matter how flawed the Kui family may have been, their proposal was still the best match possible. "I'm waiting for him." 1,000 feelings surged in my heart, and only a trace of sorrow escaped. "I'm afraid he'll be sad if he comes back and sees me engaged." Jogu Tang was not a generous man. I still wanted to wait for him a little longer. I turned to leave, but then heard Kui Zhao's hoarse voice. "It wasn't that I didn't like you." That frail young man stood there, understanding at last what it meant to regret. Bitterness and remorse wrapped around him like thorns. "The engagement made in infancy wasn't my choice," he said with a trembling voice, hands hidden in his sleeves. "But a woman like you, you're truly the one I admire." He'd had the chance to marry the woman he loved, but he stubbornly walked away. He judged me without knowing me. From then on, every wind-whipped night in the northwest, Kui Zhao would remember the girl who rode horses just for him in the capital. The girl he never married, his life's greatest regret. I went to strike the drum of petition, a place for those with grievances to be heard. Crowds gathered as I accused Grand Tutor Jiang and his wife of attempted murder of their rejected daughter. With my weak constitution, I shouldn't have been coughing blood after just a few days. Even with treatment, I never recovered properly. It turned out my stepmother had been drugging my food with weakening agents. Accusing one's parents was considered unfilial. After graduation, I could have lived comfortably. Why destroy my reputation and future for this? The presiding official gently warned me. "Even if you win, the most they'll face is a charge of negligence in raising a child." After all, I didn't die, but I was willing to risk everything. I still want to file the charge. "What are you after, young lady?" I lifted my head, my eyes cold and sharp as a blade. "To say I won't accept it." to seek justice for myself. That's all. The case was unusual. On the day of the trial, even the Empress and Princess came to watch. So did crowds of commoners. My father, who had been a civil official his whole life, was dragged along by my sobbing stepmother, his shame unmatched. Pointing at me, he shouted, "The Jiang family should never have raised a daughter like you." I didn't lower my head. I met his gaze calmly. Witnesses were not hard to find. Servants and maids from the house testified. That heavy snow in January, Madam made the young lady kneel in the courtyard till midnight. When I went to fetch her, snow was an inch thick on her shoulders. She burned with fever, but Master refused to call a doctor. He said she was a disgrace. I overheard him say once she died, he could take her late mother's dowry. Madam's attendants were always sneaking things into the young lady's food. The crowd's faces filled with disgust. Father's face turned red as fire. He sneered. Just the babble of servants who'd believe that? But physical evidence was lacking. Stepmother had long since hidden the drugs. Just as the case stalled, I heard the sound of weapons clinking so familiar. I froze, afraid to turn around. But then came Zhou Gutang's voice. He handed a small pouch of herbs to the bailiff. "Here is the evidence." The crowd erupted. A parent harms their child? And Zhou Gutang, thought dead, had returned, alive. The princess had held back until now. With irrefutable proof, she slammed the table in fury. "The grand tutor of this court so petty and cruel, how is he fit for his title?" The empress furrowed her brows, then spoke gracefully. "Miss Jiang, you must perform the blessing dance at the year-end festival. Anyone who survives death like this, if you're not blessed, who is?" That set the tone for the ruling. Among the watching crowd were many women who felt my pain. Public anger boiled over. The magistrate wiped sweat from his brow, consulted higher-ups multiple times, then finally declared, "Grand Tutor Jiang and his wife Shang are found guilty of attempted murder and moral unfitness. They are stripped of office and imprisoned pending further trial." I never imagined such a verdict. The breath I'd held for so long finally released. I nearly collapsed, but a hand reached out to me. It was Zhou Gutang's. I didn't know how he survived the bandits or retrieved the evidence. I only saw him dust-covered, exhausted. Yet his eyes were the same as that snowy night, lazy and soft. I stared at him, afraid he'd vanish. He reached out and said, "Get up. Get up from the snow. Get up from the weight of social rules." Joy and tears surged in me, all at once. I took his hand. From that moment on, we would never part again. After all, there was once a man named Gutang, and he lit the snow for me.